Hey everyone, I'm here in Gainesville, Georgia at the historic Alta Vista Cemetery. And we're here primarily to see the grave of General James Longstreet. Now he's a fairly controversial person on both sides of the Union and the Confederacy. Mostly with the Confederacy. Now, Robert E. Lee did like James Longstreet. There were a lot of other Confederate generals that strongly opposed him, Andrew Johnson being one of them, former president. Now, Longstreet has such a bad rap with the Confederacy mainly because he accepted that the Confederacy had lost the Civil War, and he no longer pushed this narrative of the lost cause. James Longstreet did go on to have a fairly successful, actually a really successful life. He had many jobs appointed to him by former President Ulysses S. Grant. At the Alta Vista Cemetery, he's probably one of the most visited graves. He's buried here with his entire family. We're going to go around and look at his grave. There's a few other graves I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to go check out, but also Arnold Hardy is buried here, and he is the man responsible for taking the famous photo of the woman jumping out of the building during the Weinkauf Hotel fire, and I kind of talk about that in a previous video, but he's actually interred here. He won the Pulitzer Prize award for that photo. There's a few other people buried here, such as former astronauts, 3 Revolutionary War soldiers, and a famous trapeze artist that traveled around with Barnum and Bailey. But we're going to walk around, check out some of these other graves, see if we can find it. There's a few graves that look really neat that I'm going to walk to before we get to the grave of General James Longstreet. And when we're at his grave, we'll kind of talk about his life and some of the things that he did during the Civil War and post-Civil War. So this was the first one that kind of caught my eye. This is not the grave of Longstreet, but it's got this huge barrier around it, much taller than most of the other ones around here. And this is the grave of James Milton Smith, who was a lieutenant colonel of the Confederate Army. He was also a member of Confederate Congress, Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives, and this is one of our governors. This was a governor of the state of Georgia in 1872 to 1877. Here is another interesting grave that I'm kind of coming up on. I don't even know what to explain what this looks like, other than it seems that it might be obvious that there's 2 caskets in here, but that might not even be the case, because I'm sure that that smell was pretty horrific if they're right here. I imagine that they're lowered in somewhat, but they could be in there on top of the ground. This is the graves of Elisha, Merck, and Sarah. Now for Sarah, there is not a death date. She was born in 1840. Who knows when she died? I'm sure it's on record when she died, but it does take quite a while to get these things carved. Some cemeteries may take their time, especially with if the family is not on them about it, about getting these dates carved, and I imagine that most of the family is either no longer in the area or have passed. He died in 1884. Quite a bit of an age difference between the two as well. Born in 1815, born in 1840. Gone but not forgotten. Slight irony in that, but it's very interesting. And here you see another Merck. I'm sure this is their family plot. Yep, another Merc. So this is a Confederate soldier. And you see more down this way that have begun to tip over. And on the back side of this is very interesting. Obviously, there was no rebar placed into this wall, but you can see where weather has just like worn into this. And you can see, I do believe that their caskets are right here, because there is looks to be drainage and 2 of them. So I'm gonna say that their caskets are on top of the ground. Alright, next we're heading to the plot of General James Longstreet. And now before we get started talking about his time as a Confederate general, it's kind of important to note that he went to the Military Academy West Point, and he actually served in the Mexican-American War. This was one of the wars where General Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and Grant also served as well. They were on the same side, but boundaries of the North and South and disagreements would split them apart whenever the Civil War began. Now over here at the grave of General Longstreet, you do see the wife of his first wife, who is Maria Louisa Garden, born 1827 and died in 1889. And we are getting a little concert action from the groundskeeper at the cemetery. His second wife, Helen Dortch, she's actually not buried in this plot, which is interesting. I assume that she would have been buried here, but she's not. She's actually buried at the Westview Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia. I kind of wonder why she chose to be buried at the Westview Cemetery. It's possible, I haven't done a whole lot of research on her. It's possible that she may have remarried and could be in a family plot there. But his first wife, Helen, or his second wife, Helen, is not buried at the Longstreet plot, and I assume it is because she remarried. But Maria, you notice the age difference between James Longstreet and his first wife. 1827 she was born, and Longstreet was born in 1821. So about 6 years of an age difference. That was not the case with his second wife. Now, Helen met James Longstreet through a school roommate. They got married on September 8th, 1897. She was 34 and he was 76. She was widowed in 1904 and childless. When Helen lost her husband James in 1904, she devoted much of her time to ensure that General Longstreet was accurately portrayed by history. In 1905, she documented her husband's account of the Civil War by publishing the book Lee and Longstreet at High Tide. Another important cause that she took up about 1911 was the creation of a state park at Tallulah Gorge. Dortch Longstreet, Helen, her maiden name being Dortch, was opposed to a plan by Georgia Power to build a series of hydroelectric dams along the original course of the Tallulah Gorge, and concerned about the potential impact on the gorge. Although unsuccessful, her campaign was one of the first conservation movements in Georgia. During World War II, she was a Rosie the Riveter at the Bell Aircraft Plant in Atlanta. Helen was also politically active. She became a member of the Progressive Party and supported Theodore Roosevelt when he lost the Republican nomination to Taft in 1912. She was a delegate to the Progressive Party convention in 1912. She ran an unsuccessful write-in campaign for governor of Georgia against Herman Talmadge in 1950. She received a number of honors. In 1947, she became the first woman to have her portrait placed in the state capitol. When the gorge was finally created in 1993, it was done in her honor, and the trails in the park were named the Helen Dortch Longstreet Trail System. Helen Dortch Longstreet was inducted into the Georgia Women of Achievement in 2004. James Longstreet was always a question mark in the history of the American Civil War. He was often blamed by his former Confederate associates for the South's decisive defeat at the Battle of Gettysburg. Many historians are often debating whether his impressive victories throughout the war were due to his skill as a military leader or his luck. And though he was the Army of Northern Virginia's top lieutenant, Longstreet also failed to become a Civil War legend like his commander, Robert E. Lee, or his subordinates, Stonewall Jackson and Jeb Stuart.